Right now, on the Leighton Smith Show on News Talk ZB.
Morning and welcome to the program. We're here till midday. Our number if you'd like to, and the end of the year. A number if you'd like to join us, 0800 80 1080. The email is leighton@newstalkzb.co.nz, and you can text on 9292. Where to begin? It's like a smorgasbord. We were used to, over a long period of time, pretty much all my lifetime, used to everything shutting down at Christmas time. You know, during the Christmas summer holidays, everything shut down. Nobody did anything. No news was made. The world has changed. It's done a flip. And it's been happening everywhere. Everything from, dare I mention it, and I'm sick of hearing about it, weather and a bit of heat, through to Trump and Davos, what's going on in this country, what's going on in that country, Europe and the EU and Britain. There is a never-ending supply of material for anybody who wants to talk or is interested in listening to stuff about politics, change, the world, where it's going, where it's been, and what could happen and what won't happen. But nobody knows exactly. All anybody can do is make a best guess. I heard somebody do that this morning. I can't think what it was. It was on this station. And they were asked a question about this, that, or the other, and they came up with a guess. Guesses are worthless in the greater scheme of things. And I thought, well, you know, you've got to have an opinion, so guessing, I guess, is better than nothing. The situation with the New Zealand Prime Minister. I'm not going to rush into these things like a bull at a gate, because there are so many of them. They will emerge, even though they've been around for a little while. They'll emerge over the next few hours and the next few days and what have you. There is much to be said about the New Zealand Prime Minister at the moment, including congratulations, by the way. Let me be clear. Congratulations. Anybody who finds themselves in the position that the Prime Minister has found herself in deserves to be congratulated. And then you get that out of the way and you can get on with business. There are things like that have been preoccupying a lot of people, things like glitter boobs. Seriously? All right, so seeing I've mentioned it, let's deal with it. Glitter boobs. The guy who assaulted the woman at Rhythm and Vines, lock him up. He was guilty of assault. You saw it. You can't deny it. He was guilty of assault. End of story. Needs to be punished accordingly. I don't know what you think punishing accordingly is, but he needs to be punished accordingly. You cannot go around doing things like that. But neither should you be stupid enough to go around with your tits showing, for goodness sake. I mean, it's just, the whole thing is so absurd, you could almost say it only happened in New Zealand. And now we've got them marching down Queen Street or wherever they were. I mean, it's like what it reminded me of, if I may draw the analogy, is cows at milking time lining up at the gate. Anybody else say anything like that? It's true. So having dealt with that, the parliamentary prayer that has been dissed by the incumbent speaker, I ask this in all seriousness. What is your reaction to it? Now, there are some people who say, good, get rid of it, good riddance, because they don't believe in anything. You have history on its side. You have meaning on its side. You have part of history is the nation's foundations, the belief systems that have made this country, or had a large part in its founding and foundation and development. You've got a lot of things. But then you've got the speaker who, off his own bat, changes it. No discussion. I know it was announced, or there was a mention made of it toward the end of last year, but no discussion. No approval from anybody, no vote on it, no discussion or consulting with the public, no opinion making, nothing. He just dissed it. In some parts of the world, that's called tyranny. And I think he's a disgrace. End of story. Then we have socialism, which is where we're headed in this country. We have socialism, and I have some things to say about that sometime in the not too distant. Socialism and misery, because the two go hand in hand. And it needs to be discussed. The 90-day trial, for instance, has been dumped. Idiots. If there was one thing that was good, it was the 90-day trial for everybody. I'm in possession of a little detail of an incident that took place 2 days ago. And it's directly connected to the 90-day trial, although you might have to maze your way from one to the other. But it's directly connected. It reflects the attitude of people in this country, young people in particular, and why things are going wrong for so many of them. I'll tell you about it a bit later. But it's interesting. Virtue signalling. Has ever there been such a stupid phrase? A stupid term? Virtue signalling. But it's getting bandied about all over. Virtue signalling. Do you know what it means? Seriously, do you really know what it means? Mrs. Producer doesn't know what it means. It means saying something to make you look good over something that might be current. You don't do anything about it. You just say something, like the hashtag #MeToo thing. That's virtue signalling. Just prime example. You know, bring our girls back or whatever it was that Michelle Obama got involved with. That's virtue signalling. Didn't do anything, didn't achieve anything. It just made everybody sort of feel like, I'm doing my thing. There is a lot more as well. Paris is flooding. Did you know that? I'm just throwing these things out because they interest me. Paris is flooding. Little research, because somebody said to me, yeah, you don't believe in man-made global warming, but Paris is flooding, eh? Whose fault's that? Well, why do you think it happened in, I did a little research. 1649, 1651, 1658, 1690, 1711, 1732, 1740, 1779, 1795. You get the picture? It's happened many, many times. And there's reasons for it. It's got nothing to do with climate. Nothing. So don't come at me with that. Anyway, my question is, at this particular point of the morning, to roll things, is your reaction to the prayer dissing, the dumping of it, or the mention of Jesus Christ? Whatever your thoughts might be. 0800 80 1080. Email is Leighton at newstalksab.co.nz. Text 9292. And I just repeat, there are so many matters that need attention that we could be here 24/7 for the rest of the week. News Talks will be 12 to 9. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Leighton.
You have the honour of being caller number 1 for the year.
I'm very humbled to accept it, but can I say right at the beginning, and I'm sure on behalf of hundreds of thousands of us, we're incredibly glad to hear your voice back on the radio again.
Well, very nice of you.
Believe me, it's totally sincere. Anyway, the parliamentary prayer, there's just so many things about Parliament nowadays that really you begin to wonder whether the inmates are running the place for their benefit or for the benefit of the people that they're, inverted commas, supposed to be trying to represent.
It's a very interesting point that you make, actually, and one could be forgiven for thinking that you're spot on with your implication.
Well, I'm baffled. This is a Christian country, whether it's believed to be or not. Everything about our system revolves around that. And it was mentioned that now Islamics are the fastest growing religion in the country. If we went to any of the Islamic countries and started using that line of argument to suggest that, consideration be given to our position, I think our lifestyle would be measured in hundredths of a second. Where we're going here, it's a specious argument to pretend that we're anything other than a Christian country, and that people who come here are expected to certainly preserve their own faiths and beliefs, but join with us, become part of the community. And for some reason, every single step that we seem to be, inflicted with, the implications are different. As if, we can't carry on using Jesus in the prayer. I think the Queen's gone as well. Mm-hmm. Simply because we've got to make consideration for these people who are coming in. Aren't we looking at things back to front? I mean, you can take other examples.
Well, hang on, before you go there, I'm interested in something else.
Yeah.
If you, what's a prayer? Prayer is to what? Somebody or something, or you're appealing to a higher order. Now, if you're dumping, I'm not approaching this, or at least I'm not trying to, from a religious perspective. I'm trying to approach it from a logical perspective. The part of it that really gets under my skin is the lack of consultation, the lack of approval, the tyrannical administration of this ruling. But
indeed,
if you remove the reason for the prayer, who are you praying to? You're praying to God. You're praying to, that's what it's all about. If you remove Jesus Christ from the prayer, what's the point of it? It's no longer a prayer. And if you remove the Queen as well, which is part of the very founding of this country, and still is, the prayer, it's not a prayer anymore. The whatever it is, and we've got to find a name for it, the whatever it is pointless.
A meaningless gesture.
Virtue signalling.
Indeed, it is virtue signalling. But the other thing, too, if we're not asking or seeking supplication from a higher authority, the point suddenly switches back to the items in the Communist Manifesto to change things gradually so that the people don't notice. They might object here and there on small things, but you add them all up. It's like compounding interest. Suddenly you realize just exactly how much you have lost and how much you've thrown away.
Very well said, Jim. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great year.
You got. Bye-bye.
News talks to me. It's 8 to 9. The lefty Marxists deliver no surprises. And New Zealand needs to be careful what it wishes for. Meanwhile, the world's fastest growing religion is making swift inroads into Western countries. Stone Age phallic animism isn't very enchanting either, considering those societies lacked any comprehension of the wheel. It's beautifully framed. The subject line is removing the Lord's Prayer is cultural Marxism. It's 7:30 to 9. News Talks ZB. News Talks ZB. It's 5 to 9. I trust that all of you, hopefully, had a very, very satisfactory holiday period. Whatever it was that you did or didn't do, I hope that was the case. I had, get this out of the way. I had 1 week we had 1 week in Sydney, and I had the rest of it in the vineyard for the last time, I might add. And it's looking to be a very, very satisfactory crop. It could even be the best one ever. And after 2 years of not having one, I've got my fingers crossed big time. Certainly put the back-breaking work in. But it was enjoyable, sort of. But, we'll wait and see. It's never in the bag, if I can mix metaphors. It's never in the bag until it's in the bottle, or at least in the tank. I'm looking at emails, and there's not many of them that I can read because of some of the things that they say, and I don't mean that in any way that's well, let's just say that they're personal. Here are 3 pieces of good news to welcome you both back. 1, Auckland Transport finally found common sense and responsibility reduces cycle lanes budget by 90%, reducing unnecessary congestion along with it. Well, they're not reducing the cycling lanes by 90%. That's the unfortunate part about it. Secondly, despite a hot summer, I haven't yet heard any spurious correlations and doomsday predictions from man-made climate change activists. They're out there, don't you worry. They never sleep. And 3, it's difficult in the heat. 3, by the way, the other day, have I only got a minute? Got back from Sydney. get to the car. Everything was smooth about the way on the journey home. Everything just slotted in, you know, with the pre-check-in and everything. It was just neat. And get to the car in the undercover car park at the airport. And guess who'd left the internal light on? Flat as. So for a couple of days until things changed, I was driving up 2 days later. I was driving up to get a new battery after having had it recharged twice. And I had to have the windows down because the aircon wouldn't work because the battery wasn't powerful enough. Tell you the rest. It's no big deal, but I'll tell you the rest after 9.
7 is forecast.
0800 80 1080. Email is leighton@newstalks.co.nz. Text on 9292. Going back to that story, leaving the interior light on for a week in the car park at the airport, flat battery. And the AA guy came and got it going and did a test and what have you, and gave me a printed report and said, you need to replace the battery. And I got home and I thought, no, it'll be okay for a couple of days, you know, I don't want to go out. So 2 days later when I went to go somewhere, wouldn't go. Anyway, we got it started and off the quad bike on this occasion, would you believe? And then I'm driving up the motorway to buy a new battery. And there's no aircon because it's not powerful enough to do it. Nothing like that is working. So I had left the windows down half the night before, and they wouldn't work except the driver's window. Yeah, electronics and all of that. And the easier you make life we make life for ourselves was all the new developments and technology and what have you, the more things can screw up. So I'm driving up the motorway and the windows are half down and the driver's window's right down and the hot air, because it was 30 degrees, the hot air was rushing in a cooling sort of way, sort of. And I'm thinking, I feel like I'm 18 again and I'm going to the beach. It's exactly how it just came to me. That's how it felt. No aircon, just good hot air. And gee, it felt good. It really felt good. That's all. I told you it wasn't any big deal. Now back to point number 3 from Jim, who wrote the other two before I distracted myself. Renowned clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson has released his new book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, and with rule number 1 being stand up straight with your shoulders back. I'm definitely going to read it. I've had a couple of other emails asking about Jordan Peterson when we're having him on, because I said I would. Let me tell you that he is in such huge demand at the moment. He is everywhere. I don't know. We haven't made application for it yet, and I want to get the book first. I ordered it, and it's undoubtedly on its way. But I want to get the book first before we talk with him, but we'll be doing our very best to make sure that happens. Peter, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. I guess I have a question first. I was wondering, do you feel this is a Christian country, or is this a secular country that is welcoming to all Christians?
I'll answer that in a second. But what do you think?
Well, I think that this is a secular. Well, I don't think this is a secular country. I think this is a country which has certain laws, specifically the Bill of Rights and the Human Rights Act, and under that legislation, and I think under the principle that most people of New Zealand would agree with, we should have freedom of belief. And I don't understand why you think that the Parliament should support one particular belief over others. I realise that there's a history of this happening, but in a secular country today, where we see, and you know, you've already had a caller refer to Islam, trying to make the argument that we should support Christianity for the same reason that I didn't even quite understand the argument. I mean, the example that the Saudis and other Islamic countries do of having the state support religion and you know, expressly have religious police, that is fundamentally incompatible with a secular country that supports a freedom of belief. And I don't understand how you can say on one hand that you support Christian prayer in Parliament and to the exclusion of others, and at the same time believe that we should have a secular state. So I'm asking you, you know, how do you square those two things?
Well, if you were paying attention, I said it didn't matter whether you were for it or against it. It's the way that it's been removed that is the principle at discussion point here, as far as I'm concerned. Now, having dealt with that, tell me this. Where in the greater scheme of things does the prayer as it has been restrict anybody else from having their own beliefs?
I think it's an indication of the state having a particular point of view.
There is no compulsion. There is no compulsion to believe anything. You're free to believe whatever you want.
Right. Is that what you believe? Then tell me, why are 40% of schools, primary schools in New Zealand, teaching religious instruction expressly Christian, and why is it that parents do not have the right of informed consent? Why is that?
Well, they do.
No, they don't. And you should know the law. They don't have the right of informed consent. They can opt out if they discover it. But the reality is that many parents don't discover it until their children are being indoctrinated.
Well, that's
the reality of it.
Is the reality of it that the parents who don't have a clue aren't being the parents that they should be?
Oh, right. So we're going to be victim blaming now. So we're going to say, no, they shouldn't. They should be informed expressly by the school. How are they going to know what's going on in the school unless the school tell them? I mean, they find out when their children come crying to them thinking, oh, my God, my parents are going to go to hell. And that's what they're being told by the school, or by being told by the religious instruction that has been allowed into the school. So I mean, okay.
I think you exaggerate to some considerable degree.
We absolutely do not exaggerate. We have hundreds of reports of this. The issue of secularism in New Zealand is extremely important, and the prayer and government. I mean, yes, it would be nice for the government to walk the talk in terms of actually obeying the Human Rights Act, right? We want them to actually follow the legislation and the intent of that legislation.
Okay.
Right?
So tell me,
I think if you're taking a position that we shouldn't be doing that, and we should be making people who are not religious, and that's like a majority, almost a majority in this country now, over 40%. The Christians are certainly in the minority now. Are you saying that we should make the majority of people feel as if they don't belong in the country?
I've never said anything like that at all.
But that's the implication when you're saying that you're fighting to have Christianity put in like we're some kind of theocracy. We're not a theocracy. We shouldn't be having prayers that are specific, and we had someone talking about, taking Jesus out, and that's all that's happened here. We're taking Jesus out. We're still the prayer still exists, and it's still to a God, right? Personally,
hold it. What God?
Well, typically it's the Abrahamic God, which would include the Jewish, the Islamic, and the Christian God.
I think that you're coming up a bit short on information with regard to that.
What? How do you mean?
Well, you're suggesting it's the same God.
It is.
Says who?
The Torah. Okay, so Christianity, do they have the Old Testament?
No, I'm talking about Islam.
No, okay, well, Islam came after Christianity.
But you're saying it's the same God. I'm suggesting to you that you're misplacing your faith.
They worship the same God, right? So.
Well, there is a massive debate over that.
Well, you can debate all you like, but I mean that's just the history, right?
No, it's not.
Okay, I'm not going to get into the debate of that. I mean, we have our positions. The discussion
you and I have our positions.
The discussion now is about whether New Zealand should be a secular state and whether it should be inclusive of all people. And I think you and the people making the protests today are suggesting that we should be some kind of theocracy where Christianity should have special privileges. They already have special privileges.
Tell me something, Paul. Paul. Tell me something. Where and why did you come to this conclusion or this form the attitude that you have?
Why did I don't think we. Well, basically, I've experienced. Well, there are two essential points that I've got involved with this mission. The first one was when I was trying to do an affidavit and was forced to swear an oath on the Bible. And, I mean, that was a bit of a niggle, and it kind of got me annoyed, especially since that should be illegal. The second thing was when I heard of, when I was involved with parents who reported being ostracized from their communities because they didn't let their children go to religious instruction classes. And that's when I was involved in starting the Secular Education Network, because there was a manifest harm being done to people. And this is really what I care about. I mean, you know, I'm not an angry atheist who just wants to oppose religion for the sake of it. The issue here was that there were real harms being done to children who were being upset and marginalised and ostracised from their communities over belief. And the New Zealand school system, I was told or believed until several years ago, was that it was universal, it was free. We can discuss that another time. But it was also secular in the sense that it was inclusive of all children. But that's not the reality in New Zealand. The reality is that children are ostracised from their peers because of religion. And okay, we're all grown-ups. If you go into Parliament and you hear a prayer, I'm not going to be crying necessarily. But I think the principle is that we want to be walking the talk. You know, if we're talking about a Bill of Rights where we have freedom of religion, what's the state got to do with promoting a specific religion when it opens?
Okay, so just to wrap this up, because I'm going to wrap it up, the prayer has been the same since Parliament was established. We accept that?
Yep.
So under what auspices should it be changed? Under whose authority?
Well, presumably the government has the authority to change it.
I'm asking you who should make that decision. If this is a democracy and changes, some people want change, how should
Did you vote for a representative? Did you vote for a representative?
How should it be done?
Well, we all know how it's done, right? We vote for representatives and they make the decisions.
The representatives?
Yes.
So what?
Now remember, there's
No, I haven't got time to. I haven't got time to continue. I just want you to know. I want you to tell me who should have the authority to make that change in something that is established, traditional.
Very simple. The government of the day.
So the governing party, the individual who is in charge of parliamentary procedure, as in the Speaker, should be able to do it on his own.
I think the.
So I'll leave you with this thought, Peter. On that basis, should the Speaker be allowed to establish Satan as the target for the prayer? Just asking. Thanks for the call. Good conversation. 9:19. News talks about 9. John, morning.
Yeah, morning, Leighton. Just concerning the prayer, and an interesting statement an Australian Prime Minister said around about, it was after the Lint Cafe massacre, and he had some superb words. He said, well, in my opinion, he said, first of all, people are welcome to this country as long as they bring their heritage and don't bring their hatred. And the other thing he said was that we like people who assimilate into our society and not aggregate. And I feel as though, relating this in a small way to the prayer, that the Speaker had no authority to change the prayer that has been in existence for over 100 years without our representatives having a chance to discuss it. So to me, it seemed to be a unilateral action. I don't mind if the majority of Parliament decided to change it, but from where I'm sitting from, it was a unilateral action by a Labour MP to change the prayer.
Well, the Speaker has authority to govern Parliament. When it comes, my last point to the previous caller, and I know what his answer would be, but that doesn't matter. It was a relevant comment as far as I was concerned. If the Speaker can remove the name of Jesus Christ, I mean, there's no point in avoiding the name. If he can remove that name, then why could he not then insert another name?
I think I agree.
I'm talking power-wise.
I think he's under a duty to the people of New Zealand to show that why he has made that decision, but also to give us a chance to comment on the decision before he made it. I think that's one of the key aspects of a democracy, that decisions need to be capable of being examined. Decisions need to have the light of day put on them, and decisions should not be made until all sides of a dispute or all sides of a particular matter have been heard.
There's a very quick question. I want a very quick answer. Does that same rationale apply, as far as you're concerned, apply to every decision that's made? Already ones that affect you. That wasn't meant to be a loaded question. It was just meant to be an objective one. I appreciate it. Thank you, John. News Talk to me. It's 28 after 9. I haven't got long, so in this segment. So let me just try and structure this as quickly as I can. If you're going to deconstruct what's been established for a lengthy period of time, you've got to be very careful how you do it, and very careful what replaces it, because vacuums exist for not very long. If you take away something that a lot of people hold of value and of worthiness, and you leave that vacuum, something less will probably fill it. And I just have the feeling that we're going to see a lot more of this under this particular administration. And there's a number of different aspects of it that I haven't got time to go into now, and probably don't want to anyway. They will eke out over a period of time. But there is a deconstruction that's going on, and it's not necessarily for the best. News Talks about 27 to 10. Peter missed a fundamental aspect of laws. No set of rules exists unrelated to a particular moral code. Let me get my head around that. No set of rules exists unrelated to a particular moral code. Well, you could argue that, but in the end it probably is true. New Zealand law does that in the Christian context. That should not be forgotten. With the law created, rights and responsibilities are protected, including other beliefs, but never to the exclusion of the law's fundamental Christianity. Now, whether you agree with that or not is entirely up to you. And I'll read stuff from both sides of the argument. Alex, morning.
Morning, Leighton. Are you back for a while?
What do you mean for a while? I mean, till 12 o'clock.
No, I mean, are you back for good?
Well, how long is for good?
Well, we could say another 10 years or something.
End of the year.
Oh, well, that's something anyway. Oh, good. Leighton, I'm glad you brought this up. Because I remember a couple of years ago there was a new immigrant in Parliament. I think it was an MP, and he brought up this getting rid of the Jesus Christ out of the prayer, and I actually wrote into the newspaper and protested and whatnot, and I'm sure a few others did. But eventually the idea was dropped. That was when National was in. I don't know if you remember it or not.
Vaguely,
yeah. And so anyway, it's come back again now that Labor's got in under another guise. And I think it's a bit rich that just one person can decide he's going to do away with it. And obviously it's a bit sleight of hand. And
well, don't forget the Queen's gone also.
You mean she's not head of state?
No. She's been removed from the prayer.
Oh, I see. Oh, well.
So I don't see what the point of the so-called prayer is anymore.
No. Well, obviously Labor's got an agenda, like you say, and we'll probably see more of it, unfortunately. But it shouldn't go without a bit of a protest, because I'm sure more will go.
All right.
You know, if you give them the chance.
Okay. Thanks,
And
Alex. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate the call. It is 24 to 10. News Talk ZB. Leicester's oil from About Health is different. I heard a very interesting story about Leicester's oil this morning. I think I should share it with you. If not today, later. Leicester's oil from About Health is different to most other fish oil supplements on the market. It's what they call a multi-oil because it is a multi-ingredient formula that contains double-strength purified fish oil plus 5 others well-researched ingredients that help support many health problems as we age. But probably the most common benefit people notice is how Leicester's oil supports their joint health with real, tangible benefits around their comfort and mobility. Of course, this time of the year, a lot of us are keen to get out and about, and we don't want joint discomfort slowing us down. Now, I take Leicester's oil every day, haven't today so far, but over the period, the last few weeks, I took more than usual, to be honest, because I was doing a lot of heavy lifting, shall we say. But here's what other About Health customers are saying. Excellent product. I've been using it for many years. I notice the difference when I forget to take it, particularly with my joints and mobility. That's from Helen Palmer. From Di McFarlane, flexibility and recovery. I have a physical job, and by using Leicester's oil, I'm able to move and recover easily. Now, if you're ready to upgrade to a premium multi-oil supplement, then call About Health now on 0800 Leicester. That's 0800 537 837. You can buy a 1-month supply of Leicester's oil for just $87. But if you upgrade to a full 3-month supply, they'll also send you a bottle of Element 12 Magnesium, saving you over $160. Magnesium is important for all sorts of things, including supporting stress and sleep. Call About Health now on 0800 Leicester. That's 0800 537 837. That's Leicester's oil. Only from About Health. Read the label and take only as directed. News Talk ZB, it is 19 to 10. DRT. Put a name to your, at least a Christian name to your communication, and I'll read it. Otherwise I won't. Simple. 19 to 10. Vicky, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Leighton. Leighton, I'm ringing about the prayer issue. So I have a couple of things that I'd like to say. There's a book that I've read years and years ago, Dr. Scott Peck. You probably heard of it, The Road Less Travelled, and he wrote one subsequently.
Scott Peck, yeah.
Yes. So in chapter 1, he talks about the problem with us thinking too simplistically about something and how we don't spend the time to think deep enough about an issue, and how it's trendy it's lazy. It's lazy to not think deeply enough about something, and so to just fall into line with popular thinking. So my question is if we're going to pray, and maybe we are or maybe we're not in Parliament, if we're going to pray, who are we going to pray to? And I think that's at the bottom of this, is if we're going to pray and we send a prayer up to some benevolent force, who is it? Is it all gods? Because all gods are listening and there's lots of gods. And if there are lots of gods and they're all listening, which one's going to respond today, if any of them? Or is it possible that as a nation that celebrates or at least recognizes that Easter is because Jesus Christ died on the cross and Christmas is because Jesus Christ was born then, that perhaps we should include Jesus Christ in our prayer?
There is something else that I want to insert into your, along with your comment, and that is that, and I'll be interested to see whether you agree with me or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing about Christianity that I like. It's a matter of choice. It's not compulsory. You don't have to. You shouldn't be made to. There is you can accept or reject whatever it is you believe. Now,
yes.
It hasn't necessarily always been that way, but that's what the very basis of it is. The corruptions that have happened to it along the way have been man-made corruptions, if you want. But there are other religions that don't give you quite the same amount of choice. That's a very important aspect to it. The fellow who rang me earlier, Peter, I mean, he's got the choice to be an atheist and do what he wants, think what he wants, etc. The fact that some people feel differently, he has an argument. I've got to grant that. He's got an argument. It's a matter of whether you want to agree with it or not. But he's a somewhat angry atheist, and he's trying to impose his views on other people. And you could say that back in reverse when it comes to education, maybe. But everybody has the choice, and everybody should have the choice politically.
Yes, I made the choice, obviously. I mean, I spent a huge number of my years, 40 years, not believing in anything, and then I made the choice. So, of course, I have a bias, but I still put it out there to people who want to think deeply enough about it. If they're going to pray and if we're going to have prayer, who are they going to pray to?
And I think that's a very appropriate question. Thank you. 16 to 10, News Talks at B. Jeff, morning.
Colin, how are you?
Very good.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself a Christian, although I believe there's a God. But I believe the prayer should remain. It's been in New Zealand Parliament since day one. It speaks to God, Almighty God. The offending part of the prayer is about Jesus Christ. The whole Westminster system and the laws of our land are built around Christian values and the Ten Commandments. I feel it should stay.
Well, Christian values, the Ten Commandments, certainly had and have had a great influence on parliaments, laws, and standards and values, unquestionably, more so than most other things. But they've been diluted over a period of time, and they're being diluted further. And things change, people change, the structure of countries change. Let me ask you a question, for instance. In 20 years' time, the number of Christians that are in New Zealand that respond as being Christians is reduced to 20%. In a what do you call it? Survey.
Yeah, cool.
So 20%. The rest are non-believers of anything or believers in something else. What then, in a democracy, should happen to some of the laws that don't fit any longer?
I don't know, mate, to be fair. I believe that a certain amount of history needs to be retained. A lot of tradition should be retained. This is what we are as a country, and sure, the country will evolve as more immigrants change our society, but they are coming to a country that supposedly has Christian values, and I'm sure they were happy to be here. I don't see the point in attacking what was one of the founding principles of our country, I guess.
I'm thinking of all sorts of aspects of this. I find it, I've got to say that I find it somewhat disconcerting that it is even up for discussion, that it needs to be discussed, and it does, but I just find it somewhat disconcerting. All right, appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff.
No worries, thank you.
Now, DRT has written back to me, and Dave, you see, I don't like anonymous stuff. Anyway, he says, it's Dave here in Brisbane. Welcome back, I missed you. I changed my account name to my initials, so now I know. This is what he wrote earlier. It's all about hang on. Have you been watching the Crown series? The answer's no. It's all about deconstruction and the attempt to cover up scandal and preserve the antiquated crown. If it wasn't for deconstruction, the Windsor monarchy would have been thrown out in the 1950s when they refused to change protocols regarding divorce, transparency and public appearances. New Zealand is no longer a Christian country, so therefore the old prayers and protocols are outdated and irrelevant to a large number of people. Change the rules or suffer the consequences. I'd be interested to know what the consequences might be. 12 to 10, News Talk ZB. Now, for great specials on ducted heated central heating and cooling systems, you need to talk to the specialist team at Oxygen Air. Ducted systems are simply perfect to heat, to cool, to dehumidify and to ventilate your office and homes. Chris, your ducted air conditioning special, is it still on?
Leighton, absolutely, and Happy New Year to you. Great to have you back, and Happy New Year to listeners. And, Leighton, you can probably imagine the phones are ringing off the hook at the moment, and it's no surprise. This weather's just been absolutely insufferable. But, yeah, our ducted system has been a massive hit with listeners. And, yes, it's only available till tomorrow. So it's absolutely a great time to invest in a system that's going to keep you cool now, give you some real warmth coming into next winter. And we've got up to a massive 30% off our ducted aircon systems. But again, that special does end tomorrow.
Have you got enough people on the phones to handle it?
Just, Leighton, listeners should absolutely give us a call. One of the friendly team will book in a site assessment. We'll come round. We'll do a full assessment, of course, just to make sure the system is absolutely perfect for their needs.
All right. So as long as you get in touch with you today, you'll be okay. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Today's the day. Listeners should give us a call today. They'll be absolutely fine.
So call the ducted specialist today for up to 30% off Oxygen Air, 0800 85 40 85. 0800 85 40 85 or visit oxyair.co.nz. You won't be disappointed. News Talks to me. It's 9 to 10. Roger, morning.
Good morning, Leighton. I've been sitting here listening to the last two callers, and, one caller, Dave, whose email you read out. To a certain extent, I agree with what he says, not all of it, but some of it. But I also agree with the previous caller who spoke on tradition. I'm not a religious man myself. I'm agnostic, I suppose. But we were brought up on a Christian heritage. And I think tradition is a powerful thing. Even if you don't believe in it, it's part of our system. Now, having said all that, I think if it has to be replaced or changed, it should actually be scrapped altogether, the prayer, and perhaps replaced with something like an affirmation every morning or every beginning of Parliament that reminds the members why they're there, who they're representing, and what they're supposed to be doing for us, for the people that put them there.
So this affirmation, have you any idea what form it should take?
Just something like, hadn't actually thought that far, other than to say that we, the members, will do our best to represent the people and the voters and adhere to certain principles. I don't know. So it would take somebody with a better mind than mine to actually develop something.
Well, all right, but you've done a pretty good job of it so far. But here's the question: what these principles? What would they be based on? You don't have to have an answer. I'm just investigating, if you want, on what would they be based. If you've got a belief system, and it doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim or whether you're a Christian or a Hindu, but you have a belief system that's based on obviously something you believe. And that's the important aspect of it. And out of that belief comes certain behavioural rules and regulations, must-dos, must-not-dos, or whatever. And it's got an anchor for you, and therefore you're more likely to adhere to them, other than just some loose quote saying that says, "I'm here to serve the public," or whatever it might be.
I think I was thinking of that instead of to a higher power, they simply they should be affirming their allegiance, if you like, to the people that actually put them there. They're the people they represent, and they're the reason that they are there. Those members of the current parliament are there because, and sometimes I think they forget that. Some of them do.
How about a lot of them a lot of the time? Well, I was going to mention MMP, but I won't. All right. Appreciate it, Roger. Thank you. Juan, good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to call, and I'm agnostic as well, but I really agree with that last caller. I think, if we're going to change it, the changes that have been made, I think are definitely the first step. If we're not going to scrap it, then this is the only rational thing to do.
Which is?
To remove the Jesus Christ from the prayer. You made a comment just a minute ago that how would you feel if only 20% of the population were Christian or something? And if we kept Jesus Christ in there, sure, it'll be traditional or whatever, but we're not, getting to that other 80% or what have you.
All right. So the Queen has also been removed.
I think I am a firm supporter actually in the Commonwealth and the background of that, and I don't think maybe she shouldn't have been removed.
Okay.
But
now
it's not my decision.
Right. Yes, but whose decision is it? A unilateral decision by a guy who's been a how can I put it? Whose behaviour over a lengthy period of time has been challenging?
I definitely agree with you that, I don't think it should be a single person's job, but at the end of the day, this is the prayer that gets said at the opening of Parliament, and what's his job? Well, it's to look after Parliament, It's not up to the people of New Zealand to decide what opens Parliament and stuff like that, and we don't exactly need another vote on what they should say. Okay,
on what the people say. What about the politicians themselves, though?
I do think that it should have been put to them, and they should have voted on it, yes.
Of course they should have.
Yeah, I think that's obvious.
Because go back to my previous comment about inserting another name in there, a name that represents evil, and we've got the Church of Satan in this country.
Of course.
So if one person can make a decision to remove something, why can't that same person, on the same basis, create something else?
Well, of course, and it could
unilaterally.
But how do you think that's going to go?
This is first and foremost, for me anyway, a conversation about how things work or should work.
I think, I think that making this a more general statement is good. I think if he were to replace it with Allah or with Satan or what have you, then he would probably get fired pretty quickly, and there would be uproar about it. But generalizing it in the way that he has is very is delicate, and it's not on anyone's front. It shouldn't be in anyone's face.
Okay, so we had a prime minister recently who wanted to change the flag. The traditional New Zealand flag, and got voted down rather substantially. So on the same basis, or at least not on the same basis, but you've got the Speaker of the House who's now removed the Queen, and the Queen and the flag are not disconnected. Get my point? Appreciate it. Thanks for the call. It's 9:30 to 10, News Talk ZB. 0800 80 1080. Email is Leighton at newstalkzb.co.nz, and you can text on 9292. I'm looking at a headline that says House panel, that is the House of Reps in Washington, House panel poised to vote on surveillance memo release as FBI boss pays visit to Hill. The story about Andrew McCabe, the deputy of the FBI, he's gone today. He was expected to hang around till I think it was April, when he'd be eligible for full pension, but he's gone. And the story was, I saw that a little earlier this morning, the story now appears to be that he was pushed. He was told to go. And the reason that he was told to go appears to be that his boss, the FBI director, read the memo that is, most of you would be aware, I'm sure, is currently being discussed, the memo out of the House of Reps inquiry. That is the subject of much discussion about being released, whether it should be released. It's a 4-page memo, and whether or not it should be released. Now, it appears that Mr. Ray, who was the FBI director, read the memo, and within 24 hours, McCabe was gone. Because he's mentioned in the memo, along with the Clintons, or Mrs. Clinton, and Comey, and others. This particular memo, I don't know quite why they're stuffing around with it, but they are, and that's the way that politics works. If it's released, we are told that the world will end. Almost, for some people anyway. One can only speculate. But I read earlier this morning, and if I can grab it again, I'll quote from it, just some aspects of it that are the biggest giveaway of what's in it. And it's very telling. Don't you love it? Eh? Gee, it's fun. Now, back to domestic issues. Welcome back, blah, blah, blah. I'm on leave for 2 weeks, so busy painting around the house. So, writes John, Jacinda is having a baby. Big deal. Her tenure as PM is now going to be full of baby BS. So there is the blah, blah about being a working mother and having a baby. And there is the blah, blah about her partner being a stay-at-home dad. And so what's the bitch here? I don't like that term, actually, in this context. So what's the point here? The point is that this pregnancy is going to be a political football. I don't want to hear about her baby milestones for the next 3 years. Really, I don't. I don't want to hear about her juggling her commitments as PM. I don't want to hear about her partner's struggles, Women's Weekly front page headlines already written, being a stay-at-home daddy. Most of all, just get on with it. We don't get no prize. We don't get no award. There is a bit of a conundrum, but it will be at anyone's peril to comment on how she should perform her job as a mother. You can be critical of her as a PM, but don't mention the baby. Can you tell I'm not into Jacinda having a baby? The next 3 years is going to be unpleasant, according to John. I said at the beginning of the program, congratulations, that I meant it. What else do you say to somebody who announces that they're expecting, and it's something that, they're very happy about it? It's a tradition that you say congratulations. There's a whole lot of other questions that might go with it, but I want to avoid them just at the moment because there's something that's actually more important. Friend of mine, very good friend of mine, someone I trust implicitly, was attending a working summit in Melbourne last week, and he had to address the room. There weren't that many people there. I don't know how many, but certainly fewer than 20. He had to address the room. It was his job to do so. The Australians were hosting. There were some Americans there. And he started off by doing something he's never done in his life before. He said to me, "It's the first time in my life I've been ashamed to be a New Zealander." And he apologised to the room. This was over the latest little spat over Manus Island. And the Australians were suggesting that New Zealand's got its own, what was the name? Previous female Prime Minister of Australia. I wasn't thinking about her, so Julia Gillard, thank you. I wasn't thinking about her, so it didn't rise immediately. You've got your own Julia Gillard. I said, I don't think so. I think it's somewhat different to that. Anyway, that's not the point. Point is that if we back up here to the original situation, John Key made an offer to Australia to take some of the Manus Island, to take the pressure off. Right? He made an offer. It was rejected. And he dropped it. under this particular administration, the Prime Minister has been massaging this publicly and trying very hard to embarrass Australia. Closest friend, closest ally that we've got. Now, go back a little further, and you'll remember that we being New Zealanders, lost some privileges in Australia, very largely as a result of the Clark government not obliging with the Australians when it came to border protection. And so we paid the price. Never forget it. Under what's going on at the moment with the present government and Prime Minister, there will very likely be a price to pay for that. You do not try and embarrass your friends. Put it this way. Let's say that I've got a friend, the one who told me this experience. Let's say that I tell him privately that I think that he should do business this way, and I'd like to help. And he says, no, thanks, I'm happy with the way I'm doing it, and I appreciate the offer, but no. So I come on the radio the next day and I start dissing him for not doing things the way that I think they should, or not accepting my offer, etc. That would be obscene. Totally unacceptable. As is Ms. Ardern's attitude to Australia and Manus Island. Now, I want to take it a step further. Anyone who was paying attention, and I don't know, you can tell me if you want, but I don't know how much coverage here there has been with regard to the little problem with African males in Melbourne. And it's a big problem. And the cretinous government of Victoria has denied it and said it wasn't a gang problem, wasn't this, wasn't that. They didn't want to... Until it got so out of hand that admissions had to be made. And that's because they took in people that they should never have taken in the first place. There's no other way of looking at it. Why would you want to do that to your country? There's a letter in the paper today, or either that, or somebody wrote to me, and I can't remember which it is, with regard to the Manus Island lot. A somewhat undesirable bunch was the message. Why would you want to do that to your country? It's called virtue signalling, except there is intent behind it. It's one of the maddest things that's been suggested for a long time. Now, I can't go on any further without saying something else. It's been suggested, and I haven't seen it, but it's been suggested that now that there is now that we are all to become a father, that you can't criticise the Prime Minister, because if you do, you'll get pilloried. You get ripped, you get shredded, you get criticised, you get torn apart. She is now indestructible. You can't criticise her. What a load of nonsense. 10:17, News Talk ZB. Leslie, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Leighton. Leighton, I do strongly feel we need to keep prayer there. I have prayed for 9 people that were terminally ill, and they are all with cancer, and they are all well now.
9 out of 9?
Yes, 9 out of 9.
Leslie, you'll have to forgive me, but I struggle with that.
Do you? I have 125 pages of miracles that I've recorded. I've seen Jesus twice. I've seen God twice. I've been to heaven once.
Thank you, Leslie, so much. 10:21, News Talk ZB. Joe, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Leighton. It's great having you back again. I want to talk about the Trevor Mallard situation, but with a slightly different tact. And that is that I feel that the management of News Talk ZB has done a very similar thing, but in a different way. And that is that over the Christmas New Year period...
Oh, whoa, hold it. I suspect I know what you're going to say. I suspect I know, and I don't want you to say it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I won't say that, but the reason I enjoy listening to News Talk ZB is because I particularly enjoy listening to you and Larry, and you are not PC.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why what I heard disturbed me.
Well, it's horses for courses, Joe.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
It's been on my mind, and when this Trevor Mallard thing came up, well, the two things kind of gelled together. So that's why I wasn't going to ring up, but there was a similarity, and so that's why I rang up.
Okay. All right, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
News Talks about 23 after 10. News Talks about 26. No, it's 25 after 10. If a minute matters to you, then I want to be accurate. I just heard the trailer a moment ago with my breakfast host offering his opinion over the dropping of the changing of the prayer. That's the first time I've heard his comment, and I agree with him. It's basically a matter of authority, and under what authority he's done it. This is a very, very important point, and I think I've alluded to it myself, in a different sort of way. But it's a very, very important thing. But it's much, much broader than just that, because it's applicable to the United States of America, to Australia and Britain and everywhere else as well. Tradition plays a very big part in the way that things are constructed. And it's a bit like, you pull out the foundation block of something and the whole thing comes down. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen in this situation, but why is this any less important than this decision that's made by the Speaker, any less important in the greater scheme of things than something that might be far more dramatic? The principle of it is what's important. We live in a democracy, we think. The Americans are going through the same thing in a much bigger way. The Constitution has been undermined dramatically, certainly under the auspices of Obama's regime, and I was going to say even now, but less so now. Point being that when you're living in a democracy, its survival depends on people paying attention. It depends on people objecting when someone oversteps the mark, when people do things that, and I mean people in power, who do things assuming that they can get away with it because they read the tarot cards and it says go for it now because no one's going to stop you, and so they establish a precedent, and that precedent then builds on something else, and before you know it, everything's changed, and it shouldn't have been in the first place because it was unconstitutional. And we can talk about the same thing here, as far as I'm concerned. Even if you're talking about a small C constitution, if you allow someone like the Speaker to do something that he has no warrant to do, he should be stopped, and there should be objection. And even the Peter who rang me earlier this morning, and is all in favour of it, should be objecting to it, based on the fact that if you want to make change, you do it properly. Because if you don't, the rights that you assume you have will be gone with the wind. 28 past 10. It is 28 to 11. News Talks about Steve, morning.
Yes, good morning. Just ringing to say that this is a democracy, and I totally agree with what you've told us thus far. Having a bit of age on me, being on the planet 60 years, being brought up under the Christian helmet, totally agree. But I just wanted to point out that we have a manifest, and words are a manifest. They manifest themselves within us, and we live to that manifest. And in a democracy, you can't go changing words in a manifest without permission.
Can you explain that better? I'm sorry, I don't mean better. I do mean better, actually, but can you expand on it?
Okay. A fireman's got a manifest. His manifesto is his rules, and he abides by those rules to save people. Our world was built, our Christian dominion was built from that manifest that comes from the 10 Commandments, accepting Jesus Christ. So if you've got a manifest, you stick to it, and that's what works. That's what worked for us thus far.
If I'm understanding you correctly, go back to what I said earlier this morning, that the one thing about Christianity that I have admiration for is it's a matter of choice. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to adhere to it. You can accept it or reject it. It's not compulsory. Is that fair enough?
Yes, I totally agree with you. But what I'm trying to point out is that the word Jesus Christ is a manifest on its own. That our whole constitution was built around that manifest. And because we're a democracy, not dictatorship, that action to remove Jesus Christ is a dictatorial action, not a democratic action.
Well, I said something similar earlier this morning. There's another word that slips my mind now that somebody else used, but it reeks of tyranny.
Yes.
All right.
Totally agree.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Marcus, morning.
Morning, Leighton. How are you, mate?
I'm very good.
Just talking briefly about the American politics and to do with the FBI directors and stuff. I've just been doing research over the summer. It's quite interesting to find out that the FBI director, he is married to and the son-in-law of Joe Podesta, which I thought was actually quite interesting.
Which FBI director?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I try to have a recap because I went through this about 3 weeks ago, and unfortunately my memory's a little bit shy of that. I do have to...
Hang on a second. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
I suddenly realised that you said... Who... Start again. Who is married to who?
The FBI director is married to a woman, and her father is it John or Joe Podesta?
I thought that you said the married to the son of. That's what confused me.
Sorry, no, the daughter of Joe Podesta. It sort of kicked things off. We're trying to find a little few things out, and also with this government shutdown that they had, a little bit of research there, had a look in things like the 27th Amendment around that time. States Section 16A, I think it also is that government officials privileged to be pardoned from such things as treason, breach of the peace, etc. And during a government shutdown is the time where they can, and the only time they can be arrested for such things. So when the government shutdown happened, I was actually getting quite intrigued to seeing what was going to be happening around that time. I sort of thought that there might have been arrests of some hierarchy in the Democrat Party, etc.
No. If there's ever going to be, it would be. It's down the track a little. If there is.
Yeah. Well,
there are people whose opinion I appreciate that say that Clinton will never be charged with anything.
It's believable.
I'd like to think that that's wrong. If it's shown that she deserves to be, then she should be. Anyway, bottom line is that if you want to know what happens during a shutdown, there's been plenty of history to it. So, and the government doesn't shut down. Something like 85% of the, I'm picking the figure roughly, something like 85% of government does not shut down.
Right.
So, the national parks and galleries close. What else could I remember? The military doesn't get paid, and a few other things. But 85% of things still function.
Still researching, so there's a lot more researching for me to do, but yeah, just interesting facts that are popping up.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank you,
Marcus.
Leighton.
It is 22 to 11. How believing in socialism can make you miserable. Starting with a philosophy of resentment only holds people back. I often wondered if there was, I'm quoting, if there was a connection between the dysfunction of people's lives and their socialist ideology. Now, the author is talking about their college campus. The largest and most active club was the Revolutionary Student Union, also known as the school's resident Marxists. Even then, I passionately disagreed with socialism, but one thing that struck me was how these students were not only wrong, but seemed deeply unhappy. They always walked into class scowling. They were always grousing, not just about the evils of capitalism, but about intractable frustrations and perceived injustices in their personal and academic lives. To these young revolutionaries, every frustration in their lives was somebody else's fault. If they weren't getting the grades they felt they deserved, some bourgeois professor was to blame. If they didn't have job prospects that matched their high regard of their own intellects, it must be the capitalist system holding them back. Their tendency was to scapegoat class enemies, not only for societal ills, but for their own personal problems as well. And by shifting blame to others, they relieved themselves of the responsibility over their own problems. That's just the beginning. Nigel, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome back and all that. Tinged with a hint of sadness is that every day is one day closer to us losing you for good. But anyway, speaking to my daughter this morning on the way to school, talking to her and saying that democracy, as we know it, is actually a relatively modern thing. And it's not that long ago that we had feudal lords, and what Trevor Mallard has done, and this is par for the course with Labour, unfortunately, because I believe it was Helen Clark did it with the Privy Council without any sort of questions. No one was consulted. It was just done. Mm-hmm. And then we can't reverse it. And the same thing is done here. And I'll give you an example. If you imagine had John Key in the last government gone, actually, we're going to change the flag. We're not asking you. We're just going to change it without asking about it. There would have been a hell of an uproar. Now, I know this is it's a little bit of a long bow, but don't you think it should have been a question? And it's almost wrong word, regardless of what it is. But he's saying he's changed something which has been as part of our. We don't really have a constitution, but as part of what we know as government since we started. And he's changed it at a stroke of a pen with no question.
All right, we don't have a written constitution. We have an unwritten constitution, if you like.
A memorandum of understanding, would you say? But it just seems very, very dangerous that he can do this, because what's next?
Well,
and it is, to me, it's the thin end of the wedge. You know, it's almost like testing the water. What can I get away with?
No, there's a very famous saying that goes something like inch by inch, step by step.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, as I say, it doesn't matter what it happened to be. Just happens to be this. I'm neither for or against it, but it's the fact that there was no consultation, and it is part of our history, whether you like it or not. And that sort of thing actually require a little bit of conversation, not just somebody doing it with complete authoritarian.
Well, for anybody who is doubting what you're saying, ask yourself this question: if the Speaker can do such a thing as remove something, what's stopping the Speaker unilaterally inserting something?
Exactly. I mean, to me, it's ridiculously dangerous. You have Labor sort of purporting to be the government of the people and doing things for the people, but they're not. They are simply a party that say we know better than you do, and sit down, shut up. You actually don't know.
All right, now I've got what I think is a very interesting question to put to you. Do you think that the diversity that exists in New Zealand now, in New Zealand society, diversity of people, diversity of beliefs or non-beliefs, makes it much easier for governments to do things that they wouldn't to get away with things that they wouldn't have got away with before, when there was much more unison with regard to, or uniformity with regard to this country's collected philosophy?
Yeah, I'd say there's a little bit of that, but it's also an age in which we live. The other thing that I was talking to my daughter about when I grew up, I still remember when there was one television channel, when there was only 2 FM radio stations. And so you got your news from reasonably singular sources, and everyone ended up hearing. Every station had the news, and when you were at home, you were not forced, but it was on, the 6 o'clock news, and you would hear it. Now, I doubt that most of our population actually know that this has happened, because of the radio stations they listen to. This wouldn't be considered, in inverted commas, news. And so we get oversaturated with the amount of news, so you end up almost becoming deaf to everything that's going on, and slightly blind to some of the important, again, inverted commas, important issues. And it depends on what radio station, TV station you're looking at as to what information you get, or whether, I know people who the only news source is Facebook, which is scary. And this sort of thing is being allowed to just sneak through, because so many people would be blind to it. I guarantee if you did a straw poll out on Queen Street today, that 50% of the people wouldn't have an idea what you're talking about. They had no idea that this has happened.
Good grief. Anybody think you've been listening to me for a few years? All right. Well said. Thank you, Nigel.
Thanks, Leighton.
News Talks will be 13 to 12. Thank God, writes Colleen, and then goes on to say something else. Here's the important bit. As for the... thank God, this is the point, in brackets, no, I am not religious. As for the prayer, I was shocked to hear Mallard's version and did want to know when we left the Commonwealth, as there was no mention of the Queen. Mallard would be under instruction from, you'll forgive me, Colleen, for not quoting you, but other sources. As an Auckland landlord, I wonder how long before rent controls return. Tell you what, you might be prescient. Time will tell. Alan, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Leighton. I just wanted to, just that reference that was earlier made with Peter that you were speaking to,
mm-hmm.
and I think I spoke to him at a conference on evolution and creation probably last year. A nice enough guy, but when he was up the front speaking, you can see that he was speaking as though Christians or any other type of thought, they had not really critically thought about the issues to do with creation or to do with evil or any of these issues. But later on, we had a good conversation with him, and I'm sure it was Peter Hargreaves from the Secular Education. I don't know whether he told you that.
That'll be him.
But anyway, he raised, because we started talking about some of these issues to do with evil and that, he raised the issue over, I don't know whether you've heard about it, where God sent Christ, so therefore, to die on the cross, so therefore he was a child abuser. And that's one of the views they raise against it. And then I said to him, do you believe in abortion? Which put him in a real hard place, see, as a child abuser. And he just said to me, I don't want to argue about it anymore, and walked off.
Mm-hmm.
But see, the thing is, and when I listened to him, and we spoke to another friend, their thinking was not that critical. And you take the question that you asked him, by what authority? Now, his authority, he said to you, was the government of the day. Now, why should the government of the day be the selected one that can remove these things? And I think just the last caller talked about the flag with John Key. Why that government? Why him? And by what authority? And so really, I think what he was really saying is, the government of the day while I'm alive. Because really, what he's really saying is that he doesn't want a view imposed on the country, but he really wants to impose his view, which is a secular society.
Mm-hmm.
Then he slipped in the other little term, to do with Christian education in schools. They're telling people that their parents are going to go to hell. And so logically, if you think about it logically, if the Bible is true, if there's no hell, there's no heaven. Logically. If it speaks of both, you can't dismiss one and then maybe cling partially to another.
Yeah, but what's your point there?
Well, the point is they haven't thought it through properly. What he's saying is, I don't like the idea of hell. But if the God of the Bible really does exist, and if the Bible is true, there is a hell.
Well, you see, I can't quite, Alan, I can't quite grasp the point that I know what you're saying, but I don't know why you're making mention of it.
Well, I'm making mention of it because it sounded like, the way he spoke, it sounded like a plausible tolerance. But had he really thought through the issues? As soon as I raised the child abuse thing, the abortion thing, he found himself in the same position as a child abuser. Why hadn't he thought of that?
I can't answer on his behalf, but I think that
you can't answer. But it doesn't even matter whether
Alan,
we're talking about him. But
the proposition of that you relayed to us that he said is just. I mean, it's so. It's just idiotic. That's all there is to it. Idiotic. Thanks for the call, mate. It's 8 to 11. Well, I could, but I'm reluctant because I don't want to prolong it. And besides that, this is not meant to be a discussion about religion per se. This started out, and still is, as far as I'm concerned, as long as we're discussing it, a conversation with regard to the authority to make changes in Parliament. Who's got it? Under what auspices? Etc., etc. And be very careful what you wish for, because very easy to say. And this, look, we become lazy. It's like anybody who's kids born into loads of money frequently become failures. Lose the money, amount to nothing. Why? Because they got life too easy. So we have lifted our standards of living for over a period of time. We're now very well off compared to 100 years ago. Extremely well off. So we become complacent. It's 9:05 to 11. David, morning.
Morning, Leighton. Trevor Mallard. Listen, I've never been a fan of Mallard. I think he's a thug. I think he needed to go to prison for assault for all those years back.
I wouldn't say that, but go on.
I also think he's a bit smug. I've never been a fan of Labor either, but in this case, I think that they've acted unethically against the principles of our democracy. You shouldn't just be able to change something like that. Similarly, you shouldn't just be able to change the flag or the anthem or anything like that. But I think almost morally, I think he has done the right thing on account that I think it's wrong for a speaker to impose a prayer from one particular religion on Parliament and by extension the country. I don't think that is a right action in itself either. So
when did it change then?
Well,
at what point did it become inappropriate?
I think it's always inappropriate.
Why?
It's always been inappropriate, but it's always been accepted. I think from the foundation of our country, which was, I think, everyone will always say it's got these Christian roots and that sort of thing. But it was ever since the start. It has actually been a secular country. It's been secular laws in place right from its foundation. And I'm dismissive of the fact that people think, well, it's got a Christian root. Well, actually, Parliament actually has a pagan root. So with the Saxon Wittens. So I dismiss that whole idea.
Well, you can dismiss it. No one's going to stop you.
No.
But you won't. I don't think you'll garner much support for it.
I don't know. I think how much of the country now are of non-believers, and then how much of the country do not believe in the Christian God? I think most people, and certainly as time goes by, more and more people will be of that same school of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I think, as I say, it should have.
Can I ask you an interesting question?
Absolutely.
Whether you think it's interesting is entirely up to you.
Yeah.
And I've got 30 seconds, I'm just told. There's a new flu version of the flu in America. It's killed 100 people so far, and there's a bit of loose talk about a super bug. Let's say we had a black plague.
Yep.
How many people do you think might suddenly find God? Quick.
Oh, lots.
Lots. Exactly. Appreciate the call. Thank you. Let me pose a question just out of nowhere. How much optimism is there in well, I was going to say the world, but how much optimism is there in New Zealand at this point of time? How much optimism as opposed to pessimism? What would the stats be, do you think? You know? You can make a judgment call on your own situation. You know, about whether you think that things are great, whether you're optimistic, whether issues that could befall us will be overcome or not. One of the reasons I asked the question, there's more than one, but one of the reasons is that I read over the vacation that the belief in global warming, man-made global warming, is having a very negative effect on a growing number of people. I struggle with that. I really do. But nevertheless, it's true. It's a bit like, I suppose, in the 60s when the Cold War was on, that a lot of young folk, and I was one of them, not one of them, I was young, believed that they were going to get obliterated by a nuclear holocaust. And so, it wrecked a lot of lives. I don't know how many, I've got no idea, but they say it did. A lot of people went off the deep end. Which probably explains why so many people got into smoking pot at the time, because it took your mind off things. I just threw the question out. There was a reason, but I just thought I'd toss it out. Education. The dissing. Why am I using that word? The elimination of the national standards. There is no replacement for it. We'll get rid of it first, then we'll work out a replacement. But what a nonsense! The advice, apparently, was it Treasury? I believe was the advisory that said don't eliminate it, don't get rid of national standards until you've got a replacement ready to roll, which would have been the sensible thing. But of course, once you accept that, makes it harder. A cabinet paper published, this was a week or so back, I think, said the new system would measure children's progress and focus on key competencies for success in life, learning and work. It said in the meantime, the government would require, would require schools to report on children's progress as well as achievement, with an emphasis on good quality information from a range of sources. Eh? I'm serious, eh? It said, in the meantime, government would require schools to report on children's progress as well as achievement, with an emphasis on good quality information from a range of sources. What does it mean? Nothing. This will help, quote, this will help reassure parents and whānau that the removal of national standards will not reduce the information available to them. The Treasury paper showed or supported the plan to measure children's progress against a wider range of subjects, but warned that dumping the standards would create a gap in national information about children's achievement, and it recommended retaining the standards until the replacement system was ready. But they didn't do that. Now, it's not only in New Zealand, it's everywhere where there's massive ongoing debate about education. Why? Can anybody tell me why there is such a universal eruption about education? The Sydney Morning Herald recently announced that the New South Wales Education Minister, Rob Stokes, is considering opening up the selective school systems to allow students access on residential rather than academic criteria. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, the department is conducting a wide-ranging review of its gifted and talented policy for New South Wales public schools, including an overhaul of the entry test for selective schools, amid concerns that wealthy families are able to game the system by engaging expensive tutoring services. Unfortunately, neither the minister nor the paper could quite manage to acknowledge the herd of elephants in the tiny classroom. It is not the children of wealthy families who are currently gaming the system. It is the children of Asian parents, many of whom are very poor, who use cram schools to improve their chances in the high school certificate selection tests. They do so because coaching schools achieve results. As has been the pattern for more than 20 years, it is Asian students who gain access to the selective schools in massively disproportionate numbers. In its analysis last year of the 2017 HSC, the Sydney Morning Herald, or if I read this as it's written, in the analysis last year of the 2017 HSC, the SMH noted that James Roos Agricultural High, wait for this is fascinating. The introduction was necessary to get to this point. The James Roos Agricultural High, where in 2015 97% of the students were from a non-English speaking background, was the best New South Wales school in terms of academic performance. It has been the academic leader for the past 22 years. Sydney Morning Herald couldn't find the space to ask why it is that the school which obtains the best academic results in Australia is populated almost entirely by the people of Asian background. The same ethnic imbalance is to be found in all of these selective schools in the New South Wales education system. The higher up the school ranking, the greater the percentage of Asian students. The association between race and intelligence is, of course, a very sensitive issue. It's an issue which both the Sydney Morning Herald and the New South Wales Department of Education have long preferred to ignore. Dr. Christine Ho, H.O., from the University of Technology, Sydney, called these selective schools at the top of the education ladder hyper-racialised academic hothouses and has called for substantial alteration to the current system. Are Asians smarter than the rest of us? Ever since Professor Hans Eisnick was famously punched in the face at a public lecture discussing race and intelligence in 1973, academics have been careful about how they address the issue. It is complex and, of course, politically sensitive. Is this interesting? But it's not only Asians who stand out in the academic hierarchy. At least 201 Jews and people of half or three-quarters Jewish ancestry have been awarded the Nobel Prize, accounting for 23% of all individual recipients worldwide between 1901 and 2017, and constituting 37%, listen to these stats because I find them fascinating, constituting 37% of all United States recipients during the same period of the Nobel Prize. Since the year 2000, Jews have been awarded 26% of all Nobel Prizes and 28% of those in the scientific research fields. Jews currently make up approximately 0.2% of the world's population and 2% of the US population. On these figures, the Jews are substantially smarter than the rest of us. And it's not just in science that the Jews occupied a massively disproportionate place in the intellectual and artistic hierarchy of the Western world. The number of classical musicians of Jewish background who have achieved immortality is similarly disproportionate to their numbers, etc., and on it goes. But what is beyond dispute is that the primary determinant of educational success is the cultural background in which the student is embedded. Asian students, like their Jewish counterparts, perform exceptionally well in Western education systems because the traditions of their cultures value learning and see educational success as the way of getting ahead in the world, which is not always welcoming. There's more to this, but this is a very fascinating article headed on culture, parenting and education. And if I get a chance, I'll quote the rest of it, because there is more that's worth hearing, in my humble opinion. 17 past 11. It says 21 after 11. This column, I want to just jump to the end of it, but it deals with Indigenous Australians in this. They've talked about James Roos Agricultural High. 97% of the students are of Asian background, an agricultural high school. It's dealt with refugees, Jewish refugees. It's dealt with Asians. It's dealt with Indigenous Australians. Is there a parallel situation in this country? Let me get to the very end of it. We must recognise that kids who are allowed to spend their evenings sniffing stolen aviation fuel are unlikely to become the ducks of James Roos High School, while the relationship between race and intelligence is not understood. There is no doubt about the association between parental involvement and educational success. We have to be more honest about the challenges at both the top and bottom of the school system. I think it's a great piece. Of course, it's in the Australian Spectator, or the Spectator Australia, and so it'll be seen by very few people who really should be reading it. Craig, good morning.
Good morning, Leighton. How are you?
I think I'm okay.
Oh, that's good. Currently 26 degrees on the Newmarket-Parnell border. Now, the dumbest thing Donald Trump has said is global warming is a hoax. Now, words that spring to mind is nuts, cobblers. I mean, are they... North Korea and the States, are they playing some sort of war games with Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump? I mean, I was speaking to some Koreans on the bus yesterday, and from what I could make out, they don't seem to be worried about it. They seem to be happy, and they reckon they're just both playing games with each other. But, you know, the mind boggles.
Well, hold it. You've transited from global warming to North Korea. What's the connection?
Well, let's say if... Okay, well, first of all, do you think they're playing mind games with each other, or do you think this is very real?
Well, what's very real?
That a nuclear war might break out between the States and Korea.
What's that got to do with global warming, which is where you started?
Well, is global warming real? I think so.
What makes you think so?
Well, it's been getting hotter. I mean, the hottest temperature I've ever experienced is in Australia, about 1,600 k's north of Perth, Dampier Karratha area. One day it was 52 degrees. And the hottest it's ever been in Australia is 55 degrees in the Gibson Desert. Now, things aren't getting any cooler.
Aren't they?
And you got the South Island, the bottom of the South Island of all places, going into drought conditions. I mean, global warming is very real, Leighton. Do not be fooled.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think that you're the fool. But anyway, I didn't mean that literally, Craig. You're the one being fooled is really what I meant. Okay? But thanks for the call. 24 past 11, News Talk ZB. News Talk ZB 27 after 11. Leighton, I have lectured for some 10 years at a high-level university in China. On a worldwide basis, it frequently ranks higher than the University of Auckland. I enjoy lecturing and discussing research with the staff and students, more so than at the tertiary institutions I have taught at in New Zealand. Why? The students are polite, respectful, and are highly motivated. They work long hours, usually for 7 days a week. The research student supervisors are hard taskmasters. The students generally respond positively. They don't expect an easy ride. This high level of motivation, in part, comes from the sacrifices some families have had to make to send their child to the university. They compete for entry, and the better they do in the entry exams, the better the chance of having admission to the university of their choice. The academic atmosphere is generally constructive. Success is recognised, I just wonder, maybe it would be unwise for me to say what I was about to say, or what I was thinking. Let me ponder that during the break. 28 past 11. 'Tis 28 to 12. John, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Leighton. Education. I went to one of the top schools in New Zealand, Auckland Grammar School, before the war. Jimmy Lowe...
Which war? The Vietnam War?
Get out of it. Jimmy Lowe was a classmate. He was the only Chinese boy in the school.
Mm.
I went back to a reunion a few years ago and had a talk. Over 50% of the students at Auckland Grammar are Chinese because their parents have made sure they got in the right zone and they did everything they could. It's not because they're overbright, it's because they're determined and their attitude is correct and they're trying very hard. And Auckland Grammar is a top school and these people are working like mad. It's attitude, not necessarily race. And I think the same probably applies to the Jewish race. The attitude of the children or their parents is get on with the job and get down and do it, whereas some of us are not quite so good.
So it's cultural.
It's cultural, yeah, exactly.
Then what's gone wrong if we accept that something isn't right? What's gone wrong in New Zealand?
Oh,
and Australia.
Many things, but around about 1970, they abandoned the running of education in this country from local people, education boards, high school boards, chambers of commerce, all sorts of people had a hand in setting up education and in controlling it. And they centralised it all in Wellington with a crowd of no hope of bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm.
They've got another agenda. What it is, I'm not quite sure. But since then, public education in New Zealand has gone downhill all the way.
Is it retrievable?
I'll tell you what, Hekia Parata was trying very, very hard, and she got a little way with getting those teachers going back, special teachers, and giving them extra money. Now, you see, I was paid on graduated salary scales, and it depended on my ability and my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was paid on ability, and then I went inspecting myself, and we looked for teachers who could do the job. The other thing, of course, was that in my day, to get into teaching, it was very hard. You had to go for a selection committee. Only a few people were taken, just enough to keep the thing going. And you had to have very good attitudes to be selected to go to training college.
And what was the attitude of the average student?
At training college in that time?
No, in school, when you were teaching.
Oh, wonderful. I was head teacher at Russell Primary School for a time with a couple of assistants with me, and I never, ever had a single disciplinary problem all the time I was there.
You're lucky I wasn't in your class.
No, the kids looked after each other. They were respectful. It was interesting, too, that the parents, everybody was on first-name terms, John, Joe. But as soon as a parent came to see me about a child, I no longer was John, I was Mr. Mills.
Mm.
So that was one, and teaching at Waitara. I was at Waitara later on, mixed racial school again. No problem.
Well, I want to ask you a question that has been nagging at me.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly since reading that piece that I did with regard to Australia and the indigenous population.
Yeah.
And Mike, let me just find this.
Yeah.
Right. Why were migrant kids, who were disparagingly referred to as refos, etc., able to excel in an alien Australian environment which had very little to do with their indigenous culture? Until such time as these questions are honestly addressed, we are dooming future generations of indigenous kids, that's Aborigines, to academic failure. The problems faced in Indigenous communities are intergenerational, deep and ongoing, and are the primary cause of poor Indigenous academic outcomes. Now, would I be wrong if I believed that Maori kids did better in school back during the period that you're talking about than maybe they do now?
Oh, I think that's exactly right. They did very well. Now, I'll tell you as an example now, at Waitra, the local commercial teacher went round the primary schools before they came to her school, and she discovered who were the brighter kids, and she asked them to go to commercial courses to go into her classes. Now, more than half of them were Maori, and she taught them shorthand typing, all those commercial subjects, and they did extremely well. And every morning, a busload of girls would go into New Plymouth to take all the top commercial jobs. Most of them were Maori girls, because they had been well trained, well looked after, and the local high school didn't think commercial training was for bright girls at all. They all had to do French and Latin. It was quite remarkable.
Mm.
So the Indigenous people, if you like, provided their parents and the schools who has got courage, they're as good as anybody else. There's no difference.
I've argued the same for many years.
Yeah,
all right,
no
thank
difference
you.
at all.
Thank you.
They're right onto it.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Appreciate it. News Talks will be 21 to midday. 0800 80 10 80 19 to midday. Now, from Viaggio Lifestyle Vacations, my favourite travel people, Lance Green, good morning.
Good morning, Leighton. Welcome back.
Thank you. Now that I'm back, I want to think about going.
That's always the way. What a better place to go than Lucca, and come with us to Villa Controni, Leighton. Spend 10 nights discovering the gardens and landscapes of Tuscany. Now, as you know, we go up there each year and have done for the last 8 years, and every year I go back there. The landscapes and the gardens of Tuscany, I think, are one of my highlights when I take people around. So we've created a vacation this year, Leighton, which it features some of the beautiful gardens of the grand villas in the Lucca Hills. Of course, the gardens that are located in and around Lucca inside the walls. And then, of course, Pisa, there's a beautiful garden over there, which is the Botanic Garden, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, in Europe. So we've created a vacation, Leighton, which departs on July the 24th. You come and stay with us for 10 days, and you're there through in Lucca until the 3rd of August. Of course, of all our vacations, Leighton, if you want to go earlier or come back later, that's not a problem. The highlights, as I said, we've got Lucca, beyond the walls, we call it, the countryside of Lucca, which is wonderful.
Yeah, let me just say that if you don't know anything about Lucca, Lucca, go have a look online. Lucca it's a walled city with massive walls, and it's just stunning. I can't believe it took me so long, and you're responsible for me discovering Lucca. Did I tell you the architect who designed my home grew up in Florence?
Yes.
And when I was there, I'll tell you when it was 2007. I know, because I had my youngest with me. He was 14. And we stayed with Avia. And he went off on the first day we were there. He went off to a wedding in Lucca. And he rang me after he'd arrived only a short while. He rang me. And you know what he said? Leighton, you have to come to Lucca. It's beautiful. And there was something in his voice that made me ask, made me say, but you've been there before. No. Grew up in Florence, and 45 minutes, he'd never been to Lucca.
Well,
he lived between Florence and Rome. And that, for him to say that you've got to come here, it's just beautiful, I think is something that is rather obvious.
Yeah, well, it is a beautiful place. I mean, the walls are one thing, and you can cycle the walls. It's one of the few walls in anywhere I know of in Italy where you can get up and you can cycle. It's around 3 kilometres around.
Yeah.
And the walls are, you could drive 2 cars around it, okay? I mean, that's how wide they are. But it's the trees and the planting in Lucca is beautiful. But what we've done, Leighton, is to say, well, hey, we always go to the music festival, which we're doing again this year, obviously. But here's something else that's really special about it. Come and discover, the landscapes and the gardens of the Lucca area. But not only Lucca, we're going to go into Florence. We've got a couple of beautiful villas lined up there to go and see. We're going to go and experience the terracotta pot making at Impenetra, and that is, I was there twice last year, took groups of people there, and I think the skill of this guy's amazing. Anyway, then there's Cinque Terre. We're going to go and see the largest citrus tree nursery as well, which is right next door to Lucca. So it's all part of it. The package, Leighton, I better be quick. The package has got return flights in it. You can travel either economy class or business class. It's up to you. 10 nights accommodation, all your breakfast, the bulk of your lunches and dinners, and, of course, your beverages at the villa are included as well. We've got all the private excursions and transfers, your taxes and gratuities. Pretty much, I always say to people, we're about 90% all-inclusive. So we're not quite 100%, we're about 90%. Price-wise on this thing, we start at $14,599 per person. That's $14,599 per person, including your economy class flights return to Europe. You want to go business, it's around $3.5 to extra to pay on that. We have a price for single people as well. So it's the landscapes in Tuscany. It's a 10-night vacation, departing in July. If you call us on 0800 100 799, that's 0800 100 799, and then what we'll do is we'll send you the link and we'll send you out the information, and then those that don't use the internet, of course, we will send you a brochure as well. It's
Beautiful.
all really easy. And it's a beautiful time of year to be there.
0800 100 799. Thank you, Lance.
Okay, mate. See you later.
News Talk to me. It's 14 to midday. Susan, good morning.
Leighton. Oh, how wonderful it is to have you back. Good morning back to you too. It is so wonderful to have Team Leighton back. Okay? Wonderful. And I am not so deluded to think that you do this on your own. Okay? But, Leighton, at the risk of making myself look stupid, I've missed your common sense.
Why would that make you look stupid?
Well,
You're a smart...
Everyone around me, my son the other day, I said to him, how are you feeling about Jacinda now? Because the first time one of my sons voted and he was ringing me up, sort of whacking me about my right-wing friends and my Leighton Smiths. And I said to him, once you get some hair on your proverbials, you're going to appreciate a lot more where I come from. So I rang him, he rang me up and I said, what do you think about Trump now? And he goes, what do you think about
Trump
Jacinda?
or just... Oh, sorry, go on, yes.
No, you go on, Leighton. I've missed listening to you.
No, I thought you asked him what he thought about Jacinda now.
Well, both. He thinks Jacinda, he loves Jacinda. He thinks I'm too right wing, and I say, Trump and Jacinda got something in common. Okay, in the first 100 days, at least they're doing what they said out to do. What's your problem? But anyway, Leighton, it is so good to hear you back, the voice of reason, those dulcet tones, and I'm so appreciating you got a team behind you. But you started this morning about virtue signalling.
Yes.
I told you a while ago, I love this Pākehā language. Gee, I love this language. I'm not a linguist, but there aren't too many languages I'm picking that you can take two words and create a whole new consciousness. And I was thinking as you were talking, evacuation signalling. And I'm sorry to be crude, Leighton, but just want to break it down. Evacuation signalling, that is a new way for the left to say farting, isn't it?
Jeez.
No?
Susan?
Anyway, it's so lovely to have you back, Carolyn. Missed you big time and can't wait to hear when you get your teeth back into these issues that have been giving me heart palpitations.
All right. Lovely to hear from you.
Bye.
Thank you, Dale. And stay there, or don't stay there, stay listening because we'll deal with virtue signalling after the break. News Talk to me, it's 9 to 12. Now, from Anonymous, New Zealand is turning into idiocracy. Life imitating art. I don't blame Asians for availing themselves of opportunities. Just walk into any pharmacy or optometrist. The results speak for themselves. Besides, they have the population to eventually take over New Zealand. Kiwis care more about rugby and trends than our future. Good luck to Asians. Virtue signalling. Bernard Salt, who came to fame in New Zealand, if not before, then certainly when he wrote about smashed avocado. And it became a whole new little cult thing. And it was because of him, I suppose, that I discovered it. They're making they do really good smashed avocado, and they call it something else, downstairs at, what's it called? Kelly Press. Bernard Salt wrote in this last weekend's Australian a column entitled Virtue Signalling, a Sign of the Times. Janet Albertson, one of my favourite, if you were a regular, you know that, one of my favourites of all commentators. She wrote also on the same day, Virtue Signallers Ignore Red Menace. But let's stay with Bernard Salt. Imagine if you could bring back a person, say, from 25 years ago and allow them to live in our world for a week. What would they say about their return to the year of 1993? I'm sure, upon their return to 1993, I'm sure they'd find our language interesting, which is what Susan said. We use phrases such as call out, shout out, hook up and pop up, and shorthand like 24/7. No doubt a person from a generation ago would think that our biggest city centres resemble Manhattan and that the mix of people in our streets is far more ethnically diverse than was the case back then. But there is something else that an astute visitor from 1993 might find curious about modern Australia. Or New Zealand. I think they would be confronted not just by the technical aspect of social media, but by the complete societal obsession with this medium. Quote, here is a form of communication and information that consumes every spare moment of every individual's time, from teenagers right through to retirees, they might report back. And it's not just our constant connection to social media they might find curious. It's our desire to construct a carefully curated online public persona for ourselves. The positive interpretation of this phenomenon is that it's nothing more than humans seeking to put their best foot forward. Humanity has been doing so for eons, no harm in that. A less kind interpretation is that we are shallow narcissists who, for whatever reason, seek out ways to construct and project an airbrushed account of ourselves and our lives. My fellow 1993ers, the Australians of the future, have invented a term for their godforsaken affliction. They call it virtue signalling. It means to project a view purely for the benefit of being seen to support a fashionable cause. Remember that. Then you can throw it around, at an appropriate time. Virtue signalling. To project a view purely for the benefit of being seen to support a fashionable cause. The people of 93 would have to contemplate this concept for quite some time in order to fully understand its meaning. You mean they say stuff because it makes them look good or feel good? Really? So pervasive is virtue signalling today that it prompts the question, at what point did we start rallying behind this way of thinking? And why? Will the people of 2028 be lamenting the shallowness of our culture, or will society have lurched in a different direction? What do you think of the chances that of the emergence of an anti-virtue signalling movement? Let's start it now, shall we? An anti-virtue signalling movement in the future. All sorts of ideas rise and fall over time. Now is the time for same-sex marriage. Now is the time for Indigenous reconciliation. Now is the time to call out all forms of abuse, including bullying. Maybe there will be a time in the future for a republic, for the eradication of tobacco, for a different view on euthanasia. But different to what? That's the question. Perhaps virtue signalling is a concept that surfaces in times of... Now, this is where I agree with him completely. Perhaps virtue signalling is a concept that surfaces in times of plenty. Only people in rich societies have the luxury of bathing in the glow of fashionable causes. In the straitened and less secure world of the late 2020s, virtue signalling might give way to a more rational way of thinking as limited resources are carefully allocated. On the other hand, perhaps productivity gains will deliver further wealth to the Australian people and the Kiwis, leading to a hyper world of heightened virtue signalling. God protect us all. Divergent views will be part of society in 2028, just as they were in 1993. Maybe what we should be focused on is not who's right and who's wrong, who's shallow and who isn't, but how we can create a society in which all views are tolerated, including and perhaps especially those with which we disagree. Now, that is a country we should all aspire to. Well, I have a problem with what Bernard Salt is saying in that last bit. And by that I mean, maybe what we should all be focused on is not who's right and who's wrong, who's shallow and who isn't, but how we can create a society in which all views are tolerated, especially and perhaps especially those with which we disagree. However, what he's really saying is that all views have equal value. And as far as I'm concerned, that's BS. So that is day one of 2018. We'll be back in the morning at 8:37. Till then, you have a great day and take care.
Thank you. .nz. This is News Talk.